Guests on campus today, we're glad you've chosen to get a good look at us and to visit our classrooms and to spend time with these men and women who are our faculty. We commend you for choosing Dallas as one of those in the finalists of your future, and especially happy to have you here to enjoy the events of the day. My granddaughter's sitting here somewhere. I want her to stand up, and she's the one with the red face. So, Heather, stand up and let everybody see where you are. There, right in the middle. Oh, good. All right. I've got her arm behind her back, twisting it, saying it's got to be Dallas Seminary. Of course, she's already convinced she wants to skip undergraduate work, and she said, "Look, Bubba, you've been the president, you can get me in right now." And so she's looking at either Wheaton or Texas A&M. What do you think? Oh, I knew that was coming. I want to talk to you today about something that will make or break your years at Dallas Seminary. What I have to say has really very little, if anything, to do with academics. It has very little to do with grade point average, probably nothing, truth be told. What I want to talk about, however, has everything to do with your future. How you will relate to people, how influential and significant the places you minister will become, and most of all, how deeply different you will be as a person if you learn to control this problem. I want to talk about attitude. Really, a part of attitude that comes out in complaining and grumbling and grousing, and there's another word that I won't mention, but it also fits. It has to do with the stuff that comes out of our mouths because we don't like what's going on, or we wish it were different, or it isn't like we expected, and on and on and on it goes. I was speaking at a little luncheon we had sponsored by the seminary last Thursday, and shared a story about old Elmer, who's about 80 years old, lying in a hospital bed, and he says, "Ethel, is that you right there?" And his wife of 56 years says, yeah, Elmer, it's me. I'm right here." He opened one eye and he said, "I remember 55 years ago being in a veterans hospital in San Francisco. You were right there then too, weren't you, Ethel?" She said, "Yeah, I was right there." And he said, I remember in 64 when we lost our house, burned to the ground. You were right there then, weren't you? When we lost our house, lost everything." She sighed and thought back and said, "Yeah, I was right there." And I remember when we went through that terrible financial crunch and I lost my job at the shop and we wound up with nothing to live on. You were there then too, weren't you? She looked out the window and remembered and said, "Yeah, Elmer, I was there." He looked out over the top of his glass. He says, "You know, Ethel, you're bad luck." You know, you try to think about living with a guy like that for 56 years. Some people see the glass as half full, and others see the same glass as what? Half empty. It's the same glass, same amount of water, same set of circumstances. The difference is in attitude. Tucked away in Philippians 2 is one verse that can haunt you on this subject. It is at verse 14 in this great second chapter, which we tend to stop reading about verse 11, unfortunately. And verse 14 sort of slides in the back door and grabs you around the throat. It's a direct command, and Paul doesn't stutter, and the writing is clear. Little more is seen in the verse, even if you knew the original. He names two things we're to stop doing. He makes it so clear you can't miss it. Do all things without grumbling or disputing. I remember taking a Greek class with Stan Toussaint. Is he here today? I was going to look at him when I told this story. I remember his saying, now, gentlemen, back then it was all men at the seminary. He said, now, gentlemen, this is an onomatopoetic word. I thought, boy, that'll change your life right there. And he said it's one of those words that sounds like its meaning, like drip, 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 or swoosh, or maybe murmur, which is this one, gogudzo. So he kind of walked around the class going, gogudzo, gogudzo, gogudzo. It's one of the few Greek words I remember without ever checking now. It just kind of stuck in my mind. It sounds like gogudzo, gogudzo, murmuring, murmur. I can't believe it, tuition. It's so expensive. I can't believe the weather in Dallas is so hot. I mean, who does Dr. So-and-so think I am? A computer giving us all this reading. And why do we have to take this course? I took it in Bible school, and it was taught a lot better there than it is at the seminary. And don't tell me that guy's speaking in chapel again. And oh, man, we got to endure that again. And if Chaplain Bill blows that horn one more time, I am going to throw up. I mean, on and on and on, complaining, arguing. The first word means to murmur, to grumble. The next word means to argue. And if there's one place you can find a whole lot of that right here, is at this seminary, right here toward the end of the semester, which is where we're moving rapidly these days. And unless I miss my guess, some of you have fallen into that trap. The glass is either half full or it's half empty. Now, what Paul addresses in such strong words, it's illustrated in an unforgettable manner over in Numbers chapters 10 and 11. Turn back. From Philippians 2, go back to Numbers 10. By the way, even if you complain and grouse and murmur, progress doesn't stop. Life goes on. There's an old Arab proverb I read recently: the dogs may bark, but the caravan moves on. No amount of murmuring is going to slow the school down. It's just going to slow you down. Your learning ability will be put on hold. Furthermore, your spiritual life will cool, as happened to the people who had experienced the Exodus under Moses. Now, even before we look at these two chapters rather quickly, just stop and think. Think of the contrast. For 400 and more years, they and their forefathers had been slaves of Egypt, living under the harsh lash of the taskmaster in the ghetto of Goshen. No longer. They're now free. And they're not under Pharaoh any longer. They're under Moses. And early on, when they got to the Red Sea and the army was chasing them, there was that remarkable miracle where the sea opened and they went through on dry ground, and then the sea came back over the Egyptians and wiped them out. That's happened. When they're thirsty, there's water that comes from the rock miraculously. When they're hungry, there's manna that comes from the Lord. The psalmist calls it angel food. It's magnificent. When they don't know where they ought to go or when, all they have to do is look up over the tabernacle, and there's this cloud that gives them shade in the day and warmth in the cold desert night. And it moves, they move. It stays, they stay. It's fantastic. I mean, you can't miss. And it won't be long before they will live in cities they didn't build, and they'll drink from wells they didn't dig, and they'll eat from vines and trees they didn't plant, and they'll enjoy homes they didn't construct and furnish. I mean, all of that is right there. The glass seems more than half full. Verse 11 of chapter 10, they've just finished their time at Sinai. And by the way, I should mention, if they don't know what God expected, just read the stones. He's now put it in writing. Came about in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th of the month, that the cloud was lifted from over the tabernacle of the testimony. Here it is now. And the sons of Israel set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sinai. Then the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. And so they moved out for the first time according to the command of the Lord through Moses. Verse 33, thus they set out from the mount of the Lord 3 days' journey, with the ark of the covenant and the Lord journeying in front of them for the 3 days to seek out a resting place for them. The cloud of the Lord was over them by day when they set out from the camp. I mean, how good is that? I mean, what do they need? Nothing. What was missing? Well, to them, many of them, if you can believe it, Egypt. They'd gotten used to Egypt. I mean, it's hot here. It was a lot cooler by the waters of the Nile. And it's uncomfortable. We don't have our shacks we used to live in. Now we're out on the ground, and we're sort of at the mercy of the elements. I mean, it's not like where we have been for these years. Like folks come to the seminary, and fall isn't like it was in Cincinnati. Well, duh, this isn't Cincinnati. You think fall's bad, wait till summer. I mean, you'll never lack for an illustration on hell. I'll guarantee you that, when Dallas kicks in full bore. It's not like it used to be at your place on the West Coast or where you were reared in New England. Last time I checked, it's not anywhere near New England. But of course, if you determine to look at it that way, your perspective will turn you into a grumbler. It doesn't have to. John Hanna, a number of years ago, sent me a terrific letter from a scout who wrote his mom. Scout's name is Cole, and his mom gets this letter from the scout camp. Imagine being the mother. The dad. Dear Mom and Dad, our scoutmaster told us to write to our parents in case you saw the flood on TV and are worried. We're okay. Only one of our tents and 2 sleeping bags got washed away. Luckily, none of us drowned because we were all up on the mountains looking for Chad when it happened. Oh yeah, please call Chad's mother and tell her he's okay now. He can't write because of the cast. I got to ride in one of the search and rescue jeeps. It was neat. We never would have found him in the dark if it hadn't been for the lightning. Our scoutmaster, Walt, got mad at Chad for going on a hike alone without telling anybody. Chad said he did tell him, but it was during the fire, so he probably didn't hear him. Did you know that if you put gasoline on a fire, the gas can will blow up? Did you know that? The wet wood didn't burn, but one of the tents did. David's going to look weird till his hair grows back. We'll be home on Saturday, Mom, if Scoutmaster Walt gets his car fixed. Yeah, it wasn't his fault about that wreck. The brakes worked okay when we left. Scoutmaster Walt said that in a car that old, you have to expect something to break down. That's probably why he can't get any insurance. We think it's a neat car. He doesn't care if we get it dirty, and if it's hot, sometimes he lets us ride out on the fenders. It gets pretty hot with 10 people in one car. He lets us take turns riding in the trailer until the highway patrolman stopped and talked to us about that. Scoutmaster Walt's a neat guy. He's a good driver. In fact, he is teaching Terry how to drive on the mountain roads where there isn't much traffic. Did you know you don't need guardrails on roads that don't have much traffic? All we ever see up there are logging trucks. This morning, all the guys were diving off the rocks and swimming out in the lake. Scoutmaster Walt wouldn't let me because I can't swim. And Chad was afraid he would sink because of his cast. So he let us take a canoe all by ourselves across this big lake. It was great. You could still see some of the trees under the water from a flood. Scoutmaster Walt isn't crabby like some scoutmasters. He didn't even get mad about our losing the life jackets. He has to spend a lot of time working on the car, so we're trying not to cause him any trouble. Guess what? We've all passed our first aid merit badges. When Dave dove in the lake and cut his arm, we got to see how a tourniquet works. Wade and I threw up, but Scoutmaster Walt said it probably was just food poisoning from the leftover chicken. He said they got sick that way with food they ate in prison. I'm really glad he got out and became our scoutmaster. He said he sure figured out how to get things done better while he was doing time. I have to go now. We're going to town to mail our letters and buy bullets. Don't worry, Mom. Don't worry about anything. We're fine. Love, Cole. Now, there's a kid that's got a lot of things to complain about, but he's not complaining. Life's great. Life's great when you're a kid. You get kind of grousy when you get older, and you start thinking about all this. I mean, can you imagine that mother? Ralph, come here. Listen. I mean, all she could think of was the danger. Not that kid, not Cole. Man, he's having the time of his life. What in the world's wrong with these people? Why in the world do we read what we read in verses 1 through 6 of chapter 11? The people became like those who complain of adversity in the hearing of the Lord. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. Hebrew's a little squirrely here. It seems to best say, now the people became truly murmurous, an offense to the Lord's ears. Don't forget that. Things got a little hot. Things got a little long. Diet got a little boring. Classes got a little wearisome. Moses got a little tired. Life got a little oppressive. The people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died out. So the name of the place is called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. Now please keep reading. There's a whole new group that emerges. There's some of this group in every student body. Text here calls it the rabble. The rabble. They're the ones who lead the complaining that's going on in the student body. The rabble who were among them had greedy desires, and also the sons of Israel wept again and said, who will give us meat to eat? They got manna coming out the wazoo. I mean, every day they want to have something to eat. All they got to do is wait till the morning caterer arrives. It's going to come. It's going to be fresh. I know. They got to go back to Moses, his wife's 1,001 Ways to Cook Manna cookbook in order to know how to keep it fresh. They'd sliced it and baked it and eaten it raw and put it in sandwiches and tried every way in the world to make it tasty, and they're getting sick and tired of manna. And that's all their focus is. The glass is half empty. Who will give us meat to eat? We remember, listen to this, verse 5. Here we go. We remember the fish which we used to eat free in Egypt. They hated Egypt back when they were in Egypt, but now all they could think of was the fish they got free when they lived back there, and the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic and the malanta, all that goes with that. And now our appetite is gone. There's nothing at all except this manna. And the way it's written is kind of with gritted teeth. All they got now is this same stuff. Let me tell you something. Magic doesn't happen when you matriculate into the student body. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got, I got from a fellow who had just graduated when I was about to experience my first year. He said, if you think you're moving to a utopia, get that out of your mind really quick. You're going to see the flesh at work like you've rarely seen it at work. You're going to meet guys and you're going to see even some profs that are going to really be a challenge to you. It isn't perfect. But it's magnificent, depending on your attitude. Some people graduate and think, good riddance. Not many, but some. Most of us graduated thinking, boy, that was a major, major milestone. I've spent the rest of my years saying, thank you, Lord. Thank you. For a handful of faculty members who would invest their lives in me and my classmates. Thank you for principles that I was able to pick up. Thank you for directions that still work as the years pass. Thank you for this school that keeps standing firm. Thank you. There's none of that here. Manna is described for us, and the grousing goes on so long it finally gets to Moses. That happened, can't it? Don't answer out loud, faculty. But sometime you can encounter such a negative spirit among the students that it finally gets to you. And you go home at night and you say to your partner, why in the world do I keep doing this? Why in the world is this continuing to be the spirit among us? So you get discouraged. In fact, Moses, we read in verse 10, when he heard the people weeping throughout their families, each man in the doorway of his tent, Moses was displeased. So it's a word we could translate depressed, I suppose. He's low. The glass suddenly got half full or half empty. He now can't get above it. So Moses said to the Lord, why have you been so hard on your servant? Why have I not found favor in your sight that you have laid the burden of all the people on me? Look at the change in perspective. The burden wasn't on Moses. It's on the Lord. But when your attitude gets cloudy, your whole perspective changes. And usually you look for somebody to blame. And was it I who conceived all this people? Was it I who brought them forth, that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing infant to the land which you swore to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all these people? For they weep before me, saying, give us meat that we may eat. Notice their focus is on what they didn't have rather than on the many things they did have. Give us meat. I don't have meat. Where do I get the meat? Lord, please, please. And then it got even worse. Verse 14, I alone am not able to carry all this people. It's too burdensome for me. So if you're going to deal thus with me, kill me. Just finish me off. Do it at once if I have found favor in your sight. Don't let me see my wretchedness. He is at the bottom. And when you get there, it's a little frightening. We've all been there. You especially experience this when you're surrounded by negativism. For long, it just comes in on you like a flood. These are the same people who have just been celebrating the Exodus. Now they hit a few challenges along the way, and it's like, where is God? Why in the world did we ever leave that comfortable place? And by the way, while they were there, they hated it. So the Lord steps on the scene, and as he always does, he brings answers that are surprising. He tells Moses he needs to have others shoulder the load with him, so he makes plans for that. And he says in verse 18, this gets really a little humorous. Say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall have meat. You want meat? I'll bring you a little meat. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall eat not 1 day, not 2 days, not 5 days, 19, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month of meat. You're going to have meat till you're ready to scream. And verse 23, the Lord said to Moses, is the Lord's power limited? Now you shall see whether my word will come true or not. So Moses gets the people together, gets a team together, and it begins to work. They shoulder the load, and now watch what happens. Verse 30. Moses returned to the camp, both he and the elders of Israel. Now there went forth a wind from the Lord. It brought quail from the sea and let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, 2 cubits deep on the surface of the ground. People spent all day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quail. He who gathered last gathered 10 omers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. I mean, I love to hunt, and I love to dove hunt, but I've never seen anything like this. Neither had they. I mean, they're now wading through it. Ron Allen, in his work on Expositor's Bible Commentary, writes this. This is so like Ron. The scene must have been similar to a riot. People screaming, birds flapping their wings everywhere, the pell-mell movement of meat-hungry people in a sea of birds. Dare we picture people ripping at the birds, eating flesh before cooking it, bestial in behavior? They must have been like a sugar-crazed boy in a child's daydream, afloat on a chocolate sandwich cookie raft in a sea of chocolate syrup, nibbling at the cookie before drowning in the dark, sweet sea. Isn't that a good way to put it? I bet the editor of this goes, I want to keep that in that. I think it's fantastic. I mean, look at this. We got quail everywhere. Now, the next verse is so telling. 33, while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people and struck the people with a plague. And they died, and they named the place the graves of craving, littered with shallow graves, with mouths full of quail. Amazing. They got meat, but they didn't get what they were really looking for. I learned from Dr. Pentecost years ago, it takes a heavenly appetite to enjoy a heavenly food. It takes a heart that's right to take in 4 years or more at Dallas Seminary and to keep your heart right. It takes a terrific attitude, and nobody can control it but you. No chapel message can throw a magic switch. If you're determined to fuss and gripe and complain, there's room to do that. And you'll get just enough to get by, and you'll get into ministry, and you'll still be doing it. And I've led enough churches to tell you that there are a lot of folks like that running around just waiting to make life miserable for the rest of the congregation. Complainers have a three-dimensional effect. Let me close with some of these thoughts. First, they have an effect on the complainer himself or herself. It denies that God is at work and in control. When you complain, you're denying that God is at work and in control. You're questioning His sovereignty. He is not surprised at the workload, and He is not taken back at your situation. He knows exactly what he is about. But you begin to deny that. You begin to doubt that when you complain. I'll tell you the second, it affects other people. It demoralizes those who have to listen to your complaints. You're married, it demoralizes your mate. It demoralizes your kids. You're single, you're with a group, you study together, it demoralizes the group. It poisons their spirit. And I'll tell you something else, and I haven't had one faculty member mention this, but I know them well enough to know it's true. It demoralizes those who teach you. Just like it did with Moses, it discourages the one who's doing his best to get the big job done. Abraham Lincoln on one occasion wrote this about criticism. If I tried to answer all the criticism of me and all the attacks leveled at me, this office would be closed to all other business. My job is not pleasing people, but doing the best I can. If in the end I am found to be wrong, 10 legions of angels swearing I was right will not help me. But if the end proves me to have been right, then all of what is said about me now will amount to nothing. Learn in your years at this school to take it. Learn to take it or get out. Learn to tough it out. Learn to stay, and watch the cloud and eat the manna and trust your God. Face it, our blessings have far outnumbered our testings. Our future is far more exciting than our past. Our training is far ahead of the majority of those in the world who would love to know their Bibles. And I suggest we continue to stay positive about it. That glass isn't just half full. It's almost all the way full. Ken Gangle taught here for years, left in his legacy a number of great books. One is called Coaching Ministry Teams. In it, I found this story from Ken. When I began my doctoral study many years ago, I interviewed at 2 institutions, one of which was the University of Kansas. When I visited with the graduate dean in the School of Education at that school, we had a fascinating conversation that went something like this. Did you say you are an administrator at a Bible college? Asked the dean. Yes. Is that a church-related school of some kind? Yeah. Certainly church-related, but not affiliated with any particular denomination. Long pause. I used to go to church, said the dean. Really? Tell me about it, responded Dr. Gangle. Yeah, I used to go to church, and I remember one thing about my church. What is that? They fight. Gangle concludes, I still find his response startling. Imagine the things he could have named: preaching, baptizing, buildings, music, laughter, denominational affiliation. Yet the man chooses to associate church people with quarreling. In a discussion with a person he had known for not more than 10 minutes. I love his summary statement. In my opinion, working at unity in the congregation stands right beside proclaiming the gospel as two major priorities of ministry. Conquer your attitude before you step into service full time. If you don't, you're going to be part of the problem. We don't need any more fighters. We need builders. Those excited about what God's doing. Attitude of gratitude. A spirit that says, I can do this by the grace of God. Let's bow together. Father, we acknowledge that while we have only a few moments together, we have touched on a subject that will have a major impact in every life represented here. Those on the platform, those filling this chapel, those not even hearing what has been said. I realize now in my life from your teaching me, Lord, that attitude really is at the core of everything. Where it has become soiled and spoiled, I pray that you will clean it up. Get it back on its right feet. Change our hearts, Lord, so that we see the great things you're still doing, while not ignoring the challenge and the demands of the responsibilities. Thank you for this fine school, for the people who have filled these seats in years past, for the impact they are having in lives around the world. Continue to raise up men and women like that. Begin even during these years of learning in every heart. I pray in the name of Jesus. Everybody said, amen. Welcome all of our potential students here to the hot and humid city of Dallas, Texas. And you can tell already that things you hear about the city, just as you will hear about the school, are not always true. And I thought because most of you are probably not from Texas, you might appreciate a little cowboy wisdom, which you hear out in West Texas, but you often don't hear up here in North Texas. I've got a good friend that sleeps with his boots on, and every once in a while he sends me stuff that's worth using in the pulpit. Often he sends me things I'm not able to use in the pulpit, but that's another subject. Here's some cowboy advice for all of us, and as is true in most cases, there's a double meaning in a lot of them, so don't miss that. Don't ever name a pig you plan to eat. That's a little cowboy wisdom there. Keep skunks and lawyers at a distance from you. Life is simpler when you plow around the stump. It's a good one for us entering ministry here. Meanness don't happen overnight. Forgive your enemies, it messes with their heads. Don't sell your mule to buy a plow. When you wallow with pigs, expect to get dirty. Don't squat with your spurs on. I like this one. Timing has a lot to do with the outcome of a rain dance. The easiest way to eat crow is while it's warm. Cold crow is hard to swallow. If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. It don't take a genius to spot a goat in a flock of sheep. If you get to thinking you're a person of influence, try ordering somebody else's dog around. Only cows know why they stampede. Always drink upstream from the herd. Letting the cat out of the bag is a whole lot easier than trying to put it back in. That's good. If it don't seem like it's worth the effort, it probably ain't. They bring me in here to liven things up a little on occasion. You notice it gets pretty stuffy around this place. They got new shirts. Did you notice the new shirts? Look like a bunch of auto mechanics up here now. With this. I checked Dr. Pentecost and he isn't wearing one, so that's it. That tells you a lot right there. One of my favorite of all the cowboy pieces of advice is never miss a chance to shut up. Isn't that good? So I want to talk to you about your number one troublemaker, and it's the person you look at in the mirror every morning. Because that's the person that's going to make it the most difficult for you in the years that are ahead in ministry. Even though there may not be many people around you, except those you're married to, who will tell you the truth about that individual. But God's Word has a wonderful way of just focusing in on the problem. And one of the main ones that we all struggle with is one of those that'll get you out of the ministry faster than probably anything else I could name. And that's the lack of the discipline of self-control. And when I mention discipline, I understand there's a sort of a chill that goes over us because nobody likes it. I always liked Tom Landry's words regarding his goal as a coach. By the way, I've never been a Cowboy fan. I've always been a Tom Landry fan. And when they shoved him off and brought in JJ and the Clowns and that whole bunch of people that now run the club, it took a real nosedive, and it's never been quite the same. But Landry used to say, my job as a coach is to get men to do what they do not enjoy doing in order that they might achieve what they have always dreamed of in their lives. And of course, he then follows that with the word discipline. Discipline. There's nothing cute or easy or funny about discipline, especially when it comes to the subject of self-control. And I think to deal with it is to start where the problem is, and that is taking a look inside. And we're going to look at several sections of the New Testament, and one of them is Romans chapter 7. So if you brought your Bible, turn to Romans 7. If you didn't bring your Bible, what are you doing in a seminary chapel? It's Dallas, Texas. Romans chapter 7, unless you got it memorized, and then you're a step ahead of the rest of us. But look at Romans 7, verse 18. I don't know more of a more descriptive explanation of why we need to address the discipline of self-control than what we're going to read right here. Look at verse 18. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For the wishing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. For the good that I wish I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not wish. But if I'm doing the very thing I do not wish, I'm no longer the one doing it, but sin, which dwells in me. I find then the principle that evil is present in me, the one who wishes to do good. Now, listen to the message from Eugene Peterson as he paraphrases it. What I don't understand about myself is that I decide one way, but then I act another, doing things I absolutely despise. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. No decisions. Correction. My decisions don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. That's me. Now, I want to hear you say that. Here we go. Nice and loud. That's me. I want to hear the faculty say that. Okay? No kidding. Let's hear the faculty. That's me. I'm going to tell you, that's me. I'm all over the Romans 7 page. I don't want you to ever forget that. No matter how many degrees you earn in the future or have already earned, no matter how gifted or significantly God may use you, that is you and that is me. And that's everybody that draws a breath on this planet. Don't ever forget that. That's us. Fritz Ridnour, in his great little book on Romans, How to Be a Christian Without Being Religious, handles it this way. What's your problem? Temper? Impatience? Sex? Being honest? Self-control? Your thought life? Everyone has skeletons and they don't always stay in the closet. You want to do right, but you do wrong. You want to choose obedience, but you choose sin. Sometimes you'd almost swear you were a split personality, a walking civil war. Get your pen handy. I'm going to give you a proverb that goes right alongside these verses in Romans chapter 7. Get your pen handy. Write down Proverbs 25:28. 25:28. Like a city that is broken into and without walls is a man who has no control over his spirit. Like a city that's broken into without walls. That's why the ancient cities first built the wall, a la Nehemiah and that great story. And then the city was populated and was defended and grew and found safety and protection. But the wall that's missing is the wall of self-control. And when it's broken into, when there isn't a wall, your self, your flesh, kicks in. And it will happen in your ministry more times than you even want to imagine, or you even want to think about this morning. As you who have your ministry all in front of you, and we who have more of our ministry behind us, we can just stop and remember times and we think, why on earth did I say that when I said that? Why on earth did I act that way when I knew better? And the toll it took, and in some cases, months to recover because of a lack of self-control. Now, let's go further. Look at Galatians chapter 5. Having admitted, that's me, let me show you what me looks like. Without the wall, and take away the work of the Holy Spirit, let's just go with the flesh, the stuff you're born with, your way of thinking, your will, your impulses. Let's look here at the outcropping of the flesh. 16 reads in Galatians 5, I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. Look at the next verse. You talk about descriptive. For the flesh sets its desire against the Spirit, capital S, appropriately. The flesh, the sarx within us, does battle against the Spirit of God who dwells within us. And the Spirit against the flesh, for these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. Isn't that the truth? The things that I please are usually the wrong things. And you'll find that true as well. You already have. Somebody says something that's kind of nasty or kind of ornery, and it kicks you off or sends you into that retaliatory mentality. You're very quick to come back with a line that's even better and puts them down even worse. Lady Astor said to Churchill, if I were your wife, I would just take my life. He said to her, if I were your husband, I'd give you the arsenic. That'd be great. When you say what you please, you say the wrong thing. So you can't do that. Well, how can I stop doing it? I just admitted in Romans chapter 7 that that's me. And if you want to see me in full display, hang on. Verse 19, the deeds of the flesh are evident. Immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions. I'm going to talk on Romans 16, 17 to 20 on Sunday. And it's the only other place where the word in the original appears that's rendered dissensions. And that whole section is about dealing with very difficult people. Sometimes the difficult person in the church is the pastor. Sometimes the difficult person in the ministry is the elder or the deacon. Sometimes it's a handful of the sheep. And what they're known for is dissensions. I'm calling it, by the way, boars in God's vineyard. Comes from the 16th century statement that the Pope said against Luther when he referred to Luther as being a boar that was ravaging the vineyard, God's vineyard. The Pope got it wrong. Luther was like a prophet out of time. As we look back, we see it all, but as the Pope saw it, Luther was a wild boar, causing dissension in the ranks. And all he was doing was exposing the corruption of the established church. Dissensions, factions, envyings, drunkenness, carousings, and things like these. Isn't it interesting that Paul would add that? It's not a throwaway part of the verse, it's a significant part. In other words, there's another 5 pages he could name. he could list. The stuff that you and I struggle with. And your struggle isn't mine, most likely. Mine isn't his, and his isn't hers. And such things as these. Things like these. One person renders it this way. It's obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex. A stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage. Frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness. Trinket gods. Magic show religion. Paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, a brutal temper, and impotence to love and to be loved. Divided homes and divided lives, small-minded, lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival. Uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions, ugly parodies of community. I could go on and on. That's the flesh. That's you and that's me. Dress us up however you wish. Tuxedo or pajamas. That's who we are. On guard or unguarded. That's who we are. And you'll never be what you should be till the rapture. Never are you going to be any better in the flesh. Love the old song that ends, then we shall be where we would be, then we shall be what we should be. Things that are not now nor could be, soon shall be our own. Sounds like a tongue twister. The stuff that makes up life as it really is, as ugly as it is, will not change and will not get educated beyond effectiveness. All the theology you tuck away in your brains will not dress up the flesh. It's still as ugly as sin. Now, that's a pretty pathetic place to go. It's what John Stott calls an ugly catalog of the works of the flesh. He's right on. That's what this is here. That's what this is about. But thank God it doesn't end there. Thank God the Lord doesn't say, now just do your best and wear a cross around your neck and tell people about Jesus and I'll bless it. No, that's not it at all. We are helpless unless the passage continues with, but the fruit of the Spirit. Look how great that is. That is like the rescue when a sinking ship. The fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace and patience, and don't stop reading. What a great list. Kindness and goodness and faithfulness and, I love the next one. Gentleness, self-control. There it is. Thank goodness we don't stop reading it at the 20th verse, 21st verse. We'd all be sunk. Self-control. Do you see it? The fruit of the Spirit. When the Spirit is in operation, this is Spiritual Life 101, Dallas Seminary, for me, 1959. As I sat and my mouth was open, as I heard the scoop about the work of the Spirit, and when He is in control, He dominates the flesh. If I have a loose tongue when the Spirit's in control, there's verbal restraint. If I have a temper when the Spirit is in control, I have anger restraint. If I struggle with wandering thoughts, the Spirit in control brings mental restraint. If I lust and the Spirit is in control, there is moral restraint. And I find myself saying, Swindoll, you're better than that. You're a child of the King. You don't need that. That's the Spirit speaking. You're my vessel unto honor. When I'm tempted to dominate others and the Spirit is in control, it is power restraint. And I deliberately hold back. I deliberately do not attempt to control another person's life. I don't care how many years in ministry, I deliberately, under the Spirit's control, let them learn and let them grow and encourage them in the process rather than try to intimidate or take over their lives. The old books of yesteryear would call this the mastery of self. That's the work of the Spirit. Now, let's wind up in 1 Corinthians 9. Okay? We looked at Romans 7. We saw this is me. We then got into Galatians 5 and got it spelled out, and it didn't get any better. And then we get to 1 Corinthians 9, and we see when the Spirit's in control, what a difference He makes. And please listen to me. Please listen today. You who are still at the school and you who are looking at the school, please listen to me. The difference in a magnificent seminary education and one you just tolerate and get through with it is all about this. Spirit is in control. The whole attitude is transformed. I'm not saying you'll make great grades. You may struggle to make your grades. It has nothing to do with the call and your effectiveness in ministry. You get through the school because the truth of the school gets through you. As the Spirit controls them, the profs don't become people in competition with each other or one to be compared to another. They become instruments of God to instruct and to correct and clarify and even confront. When the Spirit is in control, your heart is saying, just teach me. Without this instruction, I will lack so much. Now, we're in 1 Corinthians 9, and Paul is a Jew by birth, but he's a Greek when it comes to being a sports fan. He loved the Isthmian game, the Corinthian games. I know that having never met him, because so many of his word pictures revolve around athletics. And they really do when you get down here to verse 24 of 1 Corinthians 9. He begins with a question. Do you not know that those who run in a race, everybody runs, but only one crosses the tape first. Only one receives the prize. In a race, everybody runs, one wins. So that immediately gets your attention. Who wins? How do you win this race? By the way, it's a race run in a depraved world. It's a race won with a depraved nature. It's a race won where every friend of yours is depraved. It's a race that's run when the church is filled with sinners, just like the one in the pulpit. It's a race that goes on against all odds, but none of them overwhelming the power of the Spirit. The work of Christ in your life, in your heart, in your mind. Everyone who competes in the games, look closely, exercises self-control in all things. Don't rush on to the last part. In other words, if you plan to be one of the winners in this race, coming through without, last word in the text, being disqualified, you operate under the Spirit's control, and as you do, self-control kicks in. It's one of the fruit of the Spirit. That's how you love like you ought to love. My wife just had foot surgery, and she had 3 toes in her left foot. I'd stop and think. And her left foot broken. And the big toe, the next toe, and the next toe. I'm sure she'll be thrilled that I'm announcing today to everybody she had 3 toes broken on her foot. But all of this was designed to teach her husband about loving her.
so she can't get around. And she wears a big boot, and she's got those toes sticking out there, and they got little happy faces on the end of them. Orthopedic surgeons are weird people. They paint little funny faces on the toes, and I look at those little toes. She needs ice on her leg, and she needs a blanket over her when she's sitting with the foot up. And she can't get around like she normally gets around. And I'm the cook. You need to pray for my wife to make it through these things I've been serving her. They don't look like you think they ought to look. I had to say to her the other day, that's meatloaf. Take it by faith. I didn't know how to make a loaf, so it looked a little like a saucer, kind of a pizza. I thought meatloaf just turned out meatloaf, but I'm learning. Anyway, she said to me last night when we're getting ready to turn the light off, and she was all propped up, and I had 3 pillows and had the ice going and had the covers on her and turned the light out. Last words I heard were, "I love you, sweetheart." My gosh. After 52 years, that's fantastic. I don't get any credit for that. I don't like putting ice on her leg. I don't like making meatloaf, and she likes eating it less than I like making it. But she says to me, "I love you." And I thought as I sunk into my little recliner right there by her, thank you, Lord, for doing that in my life. There's nothing in me that would make me that thoughtful. I'm all the things you read in that list. But I want to win a race. So I say to the Lord every morning, teach me through this. Help me understand one that can't do what she normally does. I read about another kind of husband. I wasn't going to use it right here. You think I'm lying, but I really mean that. I thought, I'm going to read this to them right now. When the power mower was broken and wouldn't run, this woman says, I kept hinting to my husband that he ought to get it fixed. Somehow the message never sank in. Finally, this is so like a wife. I thought of a clever way to make the point. When my husband arrived home that day, he found me seated in the tall grass, busily snipping away with a tiny pair of sewing scissors. Didn't say a word. He watched for a short time, went in the house. He was gone only a few minutes when he came back out and said, as he handed me a toothbrush, when you finish cutting the grass, you might as well sweep the sidewalk. Maybe. He will be just fine when they take the casts off. I just remember my wife has a big boot on, and that's a good reminder there. Now, what's interesting here is that all of these people running in races do it to get a prize. And that prize gets tarnished. I don't care if it's gold or silver or bronze. In those days, it was an ivy wreath and a big round bronze plaque that went into the wall of the city where they came from, and tax freedom and all of that. But all that tarnished. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, we an imperishable. Therefore, I run. Don't you love that single pronoun? I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air. I buffet my body. Isn't that great? He's putting himself on the line. I buffet my body means to make black and blue on the face, under the eyes. I punch myself. I get up early. I go at it hard. When I'm tempted to eat too much, I say no thanks. When I'm tempted to look in the wrong direction, I stop. I buffet my body. Make it my slave. Boy, that's a great Greek term I won't even go into. Ask Dr. Honer. He wrote a book on Ephesians. You got to have a wheelbarrow to have it in your library. I wheeled mine in the other day. like that thick. Can you imagine what he can do with this Greek word, make it my slave? Lest possibly after I preach to others, I myself should be disqualified. Whoa. That's what we don't want. We got enough of those to last 3 lifetimes. Don't be one of those. Don't be one of those, okay? If you do, send us back your diploma, okay? Just be man or woman enough to say, I earned this, but I don't have a right to hang it on my wall. By golly, I hold these kind of things tightly. This is the ministry. I'm sick of the world taking their shots at us. Neighbors rolling their eyes. Oh, you're one of those. What's the matter? They've been reading the media. They've been listening to the nonsense. They haven't been reading 1 Corinthians 9. Let's make a difference. It'll take self-control, the discipline of self-control. I know what I'm talking about. Is there anything worse to live with in the ministry than being disqualified? Now's your chance to determine, by the grace of God, I won't be one of them. Lord God, you're the one who's called us. You're the one who's made us like we are. You chose not to take away our old nature. You deliberately left that nature. Even though you sent that magnificent person of the Godhead, our sovereign Spirit, to live within us, to win the civil war, one moment at a time.